All right, let's get right into it. We're going to pull apart a real-world cyber attack on a nation's power grid, piece by fascinating piece. And trust me, this isn't science fiction. This is the actual anatomy of a digital catastrophe waiting to happen.
You know, the official report from Poland's national cybersecurity team, they didn't pull any punches. They called these attacks arson. Not a hack, not a data breach, arson. That one word tells you everything about the attacker's motive. They weren't there to steal anything, they were there to burn it all down.
Now picture this. It's late December in Poland. A snowstorm is rolling in, the temperature is plummeting, and people are relying on the power grid to stay warm and safe. That moment of maximum vulnerability, that's exactly when they chose to strike. The timing was absolutely deliberate.
So our investigation starts at crime scene number 1, the renewable energy farms. And this is important. This wasn't an attack on some corporate server room or office computers. No, this was aimed directly at the physical equipment out there in the field, the stuff that actually generates the power.
And we're not talking about a small-scale incident. Look at this. Over 30 different wind and solar farms were hit, all at the exact same time. This was a widespread, coordinated campaign. So the big question is, how did they pull it off?
Well, to really get it, you've got to understand the difference between IT and OT. IT, information technology, that's the world we usually think of, emails, servers, data. But OT, operational technology, that's the invisible world that controls physical things. It tells turbines to spin, valves to open, and power grids to route electricity. The attackers here, they bypassed IT and went straight for the OT.
And their weapon of choice targeted this little box, the remote terminal unit, or RTU. The easiest way to think of it is as the brain of a remote power station. It's the digital remote control that lets engineers manage everything from miles away. If you take out the RTU, it's like cutting the strings to a puppet. You're flying blind.
And the weapon they used, it's just fascinating in its simplicity. This wasn't some super sophisticated virus. On the left, you see normal, healthy code. On the right, that's the attacker's version. All they did was take the original file and cram a bunch of digital garbage right at the beginning. The goal wasn't elegant. It was just to make the device crash the second it tried to boot up. Brute force and effective.
And here we have the receipt. This is the RTU's own internal log file. It's like a black box recorder from an airplane. You can see it right here, clear as day. At 13:57, firmware transferred to the device successfully. And then, just 1 minute later, a forced manual reset. That's it. That's the device crashing and getting stuck in a reboot loop exactly as planned.
So, how in the world did they get into more than 30 separate secure facilities to do this? Did they have some incredible, unpatchable exploit? Nope, they used a single account. An account literally named Default, which was still using the factory default password. It had never been changed. That one simple oversight was the key to the entire kingdom.
Okay, but while that fast and dirty attack was hitting the farms, something much more patient, much more sinister was happening at our second crime scene. This was a long, silent infiltration of a massive power plant.
And we're not talking about a small solar farm anymore. This was a huge combined heat and power plant, a critical piece of infrastructure responsible for supplying essential services to nearly 500,000 people. The stakes here were just so much higher.
And unlike the smash and grab at the farms, this was a long con. The attackers were inside this plant's network for a full 9 months. They first poked their heads in way back in March. By May, they owned the keys to the IT network. In July, they walked out with the entire user database. They were patient, they were methodical, and they waited all the way until that cold December day to finally make their move.
And when investigators went back, they could see the breadcrumbs. The attackers were systematically searching for any computer with the word SCADA, that's the lingo for industrial control systems, in its name. They were literally taking screenshots of the operator's control panels. They weren't just exploring. They were doing their homework. They were learning how to run the plant before they tried to break it.
And here is the digital proof of the heist. This is a look at the actual command line, the exact moment the attackers stole the whole Active Directory database. They create what's called a shadow copy of the system, grab the file with every single username and password hash, and then, poof, they delete the evidence. It's just meticulous and absolutely devastating.
So let's talk about the attackers' simple tricks and how a potential catastrophe was built on some really basic flaws.
To really understand their final goal, you need to know about this nasty piece of work, wiper malware. A wiper is not like ransomware that asks for money. It's a digital shredder.
Its one and only job is destruction, to permanently erase files and make computer systems totally useless.
So how did the investigators connect the farm attacks with this deep infiltration at the power plant? It all came down to this one file. On a computer at one of the wind farms, an operator screen, they found this program, source.exe. It was the wiper, and it was the exact same malware they found being prepared at the main power plant. This was the smoking gun. This is what tied the two crime scenes together into one big plot.
So how did they get in to start this whole mess? Well, the answer is, frankly, a little depressing because it's so familiar. They found VPNs just sitting on the open internet without any multi-factor authentication. They found the same passwords being reused over and over across dozens of sites. And they used well-known security holes that just hadn't been patched. The door wasn't just unlocked, it was wide open with a welcome mat.
And check this out. This shows how the attackers made sure they could stay in, no matter what. This is from a related attack by the same group. They actually programmed the network's firewall, the security guard, to run a script every single week. And its job, as you can see right here, was to automatically grab the latest administrator password and package it up for theft. It's automated burglary built right into the security system. Incredible.
So, after sifting through this whole digital crime scene, what are the lessons here? What can we learn from the ashes? Because this is the part that matters to everyone. The flaws they used exist in networks all over the world.
You know, the biggest takeaway is that this whole thing was preventable. It was all built on a foundation of really simple, basic mistakes. We're talking unchanged default passwords, no MFA, reusing the same credentials everywhere. The report even points out that a lot of the equipment had modern security features, but they just hadn't been turned on.
And here's the final scorecard, and this is so important. At the farms, the attack on the physical OT equipment, it worked, they broke the devices. But at the big power plant, the final attack on the IT network actually failed. Why? Because the plant's modern security software saw what the wiper was trying to do and shut it down. It's a huge warning sign that our OT systems are often the most vulnerable.
So at the end of the day, this story isn't about some unstoppable genius super hackers. They didn't use secret, impossible-to-stop tools. All they did was find a series of basic, everyday security mistakes and link them together one after another, until they were holding the keys to a nation's power grid. In this case, the defenses at the power plant held and stopped the worst from happening. But the attack on the farms, remember, that part succeeded. And that leaves us with a really chilling question for the future. This time, the main attack was stopped. What happens when the next digital arsonist succeeds?